First of all, we believe that clean air and clean water are nonpartisan issues, right? Everybody wants clean air and clean water for their families. That's sort of bar none. Those are very popular things. Everyone assumes Democrats are automatically pro clean energy and that Republicans are automatically against clean energy. It's just not true.
Julie Tighe was one of the first people I met after starting at ACE New York at an ACE New York board meeting in 2023. And when meeting her, her passion and knowledge is immediately evident. This is a great conversation. I'm Barry Wygel. This is Plugging In. Welcome to Plugging In, powering our way to a brighter and healthier New York. I'm your host, Barry Wygel. Each episode on this podcast, we will discuss a different topic related to clean energy, explaining complex topics in a way you can understand. Become part of the community as we help to make a brighter and healthier New York.
As the sun crests on the horizon, a new day dawns in our state. A new hope for tomorrow is rising, a clean future we create. Tomorrow we breathe easier, tomorrow the skies are clear. Today we are plugging in, the future of New York is here.
On this episode of the podcast, we're joined by Julie Tighe. Julie is the president of the New York League of Conservation Voters, known as NYLCV, and the NYLCV Education Fund. Before taking this job in 2018, Julie worked at DEC for 11 years, ending her tenure as chief of staff. Julie also just completed 2 terms serving on the ACE New York Board of Directors. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So can you give us a little professional background of yourself?
So I actually started out my career working in public health. I represented home care, a trade industry, and that's what I went to graduate school for, was public health. And then I decided I need to broaden my horizon a little bit, and I went to work in the state assembly for Pete Granis, who at the time was chair of the insurance committee. So I worked on health insurance policy and health policy for him. But a year later, Eliot Spitzer became governor, and Pete Granis was invited to be commissioner of DEC, which is kind of his dream job. And so I often refer to myself as an accidental environmentalist, and it's Pete's fault because I went with him because I knew that my talent, my expertise was how a bill becomes a law. And so I went over to DEC. I spent 11 and a half years there. I worked on a lot of different laws, including 3 constitutional amendments. I helped write the Clean Water Infrastructure Act. I helped reform the Brownfields program more than once. I wrote the electronics waste recycling law. Last thing I wrote was the food waste law that didn't pass while I was still there, but they passed it in the first year that I was over here, with basically unchanged from how I had drafted it. So spent a lot of time there. And then since I've been at the league in 2018, I really had a lot of opportunity to work in a much broader space because DEC regulates energy, but it's not an energy agency. And so I've had a great opportunity to work on a much more expansive view of the environment than you do at DEC. Getting to work more on clean transportation, clean energy, parks and open space, although DEC, of course, manages the Adirondack and Catskill Park. So it's been an interesting career arc, I would say.
Absolutely. And it's funny you use the word accidental environmentalist because Eric Walker, who's the previous guest on this podcast, used the same term. I use the same term. So regardless how we all ended up here, I'm happy we all are here. So can you do a little overview of what NYLCV is and what the NYLCV Education Fund is?
Sure. So NYLCV is the only statewide advocacy organization that fights for clean air, clean water, and open space through political action. Now, in order to achieve clean air, of course, we spend a lot of our energy working on climate policy and clean energy policy, but we do that through advocacy and accountability. So we're getting ready to put out our policy agenda, for example. We'll use that to help guide our work in the legislation that we advocate for this year, the policies that we advocate for this year. And then we will do a scorecard later in the year based on how elected officials do. So we really try to hold people accountable and use that tool to help keep moving policy moving forward. And of course, we do politics as part of that. Not only do we, hold people accountable, but then we try and help get people elected into office who prioritize clean energy and the environment. And so that is something that we've been doing. We had a great year this year. 92% of the people that we endorsed were elected into office. It's really exciting. And we've been getting a lot of people who are interested in our endorsement, sort of looking at that growth has been really important. I mean, we do that across the state. This year was a local election year. We do that in New York City, but we also do it in local races from Brookhaven to Buffalo. So we are all over the state. This year is going to be a big year for us because, it's statewide elections, plus all the congressional seats, plus the entire state legislature is up. And for the first time, local elections are also in even years. That's something that the legislature passed a couple years ago. So it'll be very busy in the political department this year. And then we have our sister organization, NYLCV Education Fund, and that does exactly what it sounds like. We seek to educate, engage, and empower New Yorkers to be effective advocates for the environment. And we do that, it's a C3 nonprofit. Really, we try to do civic engagement where we, for example, we're anticipating holding candidate forums for some of the open congressional seats this year to make sure that candidates are talking about the environment and climate during the campaign because it's often overlooked. We will encourage people to get out and vote. But then we also take on actions like we do webinars and we do in-person meetings and roundtables and forums to educate people on various issues. So, we have something called Turbine Talks. You'll never guess, but the topic there is primarily offshore wind. And those are our webinars that we hold, and we bring various guests on to talk about issues that the public is asking questions about or needs to learn more about. We've also done a program called What's Brewing Offshore. We do those in partnership with Climate Jobs New York, where we hold happy hours to talk to people about clean energy. I think we're going to start a new series of happy hours around battery storage. So, stay tuned for that. But we do this on a variety of issues. Again, clean air, clean water, open space, clean energy. If there's a topic that really the public needs more information about, we try to use the Education Fund to talk to people about that. And we've done a lot of work on clean energy and on offshore wind. We're going to be doing a lot more work this year on battery storage to educate the public.
So are we on battery storage, because it is such an important issue. So if people are interested in either side, the education side or the politics side, where can they find those endorsement guides or information about the educational opportunities?
Sure. So we have two separate websites because they are two separate corporations, www.nylcv.org, and the Education Fund is www.nylcvef.org. And of course, you can link to either one from either one. They both cross-link.
Perfect. So, New York's one of the bluest states, from a 10,000-foot glance. So is your job very easy?
First of all, we believe that clean air and clean water are nonpartisan issues, right? Everybody wants clean air and clean water for their families. That's sort of bar none. Those are very popular things. Polling tells us that year after year. And we see it. Like we saw that with the Bond Act, for example. There was overwhelming support for the Bond Act, which happened the last gubernatorial year, which was a very partisan election itself. So the fact that people came out and they voted for one candidate or the other, most people, over 65% of the people in our state voted yes for that. So that to me is like they're willing to pay for it even. And we've seen that most recently in Suffolk County, for example, where they again voted to actually tax themselves in order to help pay for water infrastructure. But we also, I think it's funny, everyone assumes Democrats are automatically pro clean energy and that Republicans are automatically against clean energy. That's just not true, right? I mean, we see that, Ed Romaine, who's the Suffolk County executive, is one of the biggest champions of offshore wind, as is Dan Panico, the supervisor of the town of Brookhaven. And so we want to make sure that people are not falling into their comfort zones and assumptions about that. We also know that there are some Democrats who are a little skittish about clean energy, and it's our job to work together to make sure that we're providing them good information and helping them pass policies that will move us in the right direction. So I'd say we're fortunate that we have, leadership. Governor Hochul has been steadfast in her support for clean energy. The state Senate under Senator Andrea Stewart-Cousins and her chairs have been really remarkable in the number of environmental and clean energy bills they've passed. And the Assembly has had a number of bills passed to help us advance clean energy. So we're very fortunate that we have leaders, but wouldn't assume just because people are Democrats or Republicans of what their positions might be on any particular policy.
Yes, for sure. So we're going to talk about what's ahead for 2026, but it's also important to look back to 2025 because you had some nice wins, especially right at the end of the year with some bills getting signed. So let's kind of go through that list.
Look, we were delighted. There were 5 bills that we had on our scorecard this year that passed both houses. I'd say the top bill, and a bill that many advocates have been working on for a number of years, was a bill called the 100-foot rule, right? And this is a rule that right now, if you're within 100 foot of a gas main, utilities are required to connect you to the gas line for free. And it's free for you. It's not free for everybody else. Everybody else is paying for that. And that's costing us as much as $600 million a year in expansion of the gas infrastructure system. And so we want to make sure that there's a level playing field. And this sort of stops that free expansion of the system. And we'll start having people make other choices where we know consumers are already doing that and shifting more and more to heat pumps, where heat pump sales are outpacing the sale of furnaces, which I think is really positive because ultimately that's cheaper for consumers and much more efficient than our old school furnaces are. So really huge shout out to Liz Kruger and Joanne Simon. Pat Fahey did a long push for that in the state assembly before it got passed when she had already moved over to the state senate. But that was a huge bill for us. One of the challenges on the transportation front has been that, we need to get people to mode shift out of cars into mass transit, but also onto bikes. And e-bikes are a great option. But we've seen way too many fires happen because there are some really shoddy batteries that are out there. And so we've finally got a bill passed this year that requires all e-bike batteries to be in a recycling system that's dedicated for that purpose. So that'll really help make a difference. And of course, we know that there's people who are conflating what's happening with these crappy e-bike batteries with the potential risks for battery storage. And so we need to address the fires, but we also make sure people understand that they're two very differently regulated things. We had a few more bills that passed this year that probably are less interest to this particular crowd, but addressing PFAS and menstrual products, which just feels like a place where we shouldn't have anything. And of course, the bill that people do care about the most here on this, and we were supporters of the original law, but fixing how the assessments are done for renewable energy. So we know this was needed because of the litigation that happened, but hopefully this will resolve that issue and provide clarity and certainty for developers as we move forward, which we know is really important. The one last thing I will mention, though, that we achieved this year is, we had some record investments in the environment, right? We had the Environmental Protection Fund is at a record $425 million. And critically, the governor advanced a $1 billion Sustainable Future Fund. And that is really going to help us to make investments in getting homes ready for electrification and helping them switch to those heat pumps we just talked about, making investments in thermal energy networks, including doing the entire campus of SUNY Purchase in Westchester County, and a big piece of the campus at UB, University of Buffalo, which will allow them to transition off of gas and onto a thermal energy network and taking things that are waste right now, waste heat or geothermal wells, and using that to heat and cool their campuses, which we hope will be a model for how we decarbonize some of our neighborhoods.
And one other thing that we should definitely mention that just had its 1-year anniversary was congestion pricing, because you worked really hard on that one as well. And I know there's a lot of good studies coming out now that it's been a year of how great it's been.
It is. That's one of the things that we are proudest of. And I think really the most important thing about congestion pricing is it shows that we can do big things, and we can do things that are complicated and are not universally popular initially. We passed this law in 2019. It was a proposal whose time has come to help us tackle the gridlock that has been seizing Manhattan, costing our economy billions of dollars, polluting our air with people who are idling and honking their horns. It was really a remarkable thing. We've seen this work in other places, but this is the first time in the United States that congestion pricing has been tried. And it's a year in. Traffic is down 11%. Air pollution is down, according to some studies. Most importantly, on that front, even if it's not they don't see it universally down, it's not up anywhere. And that was a concern that people would drive elsewhere. But we're seeing that not just in the congestion zone, but in the whole region, traffic is down because people are changing how they get to the city. So they're getting onto the train. We see that it's up. Metro North is up. Long Island Railroad is up. The subway is up. The buses are up. It's a win all around. And it hasn't hurt business. Right? Sales tax is up. It was Broadway's best year, and we've seen reservations are also up. So it's been a fantastic year overall with congestion pricing, and I think it demonstrates that we can do big things.
Yes. So speaking of those big things, what's on the agenda for 2026?
So we have a few things that are on our mind. Top of the list has been the Clean Air Initiative. And that's really a three-pronged approach the state needs to start collecting information about where pollution is coming from, not just a carbon perspective, but also from co-pollutants. So DEC adopted that rule at the end of last year, and we are hoping that they will advance in the coming months the next two components of that, which is establishing a cap and invest program. And then NYSERDA would adopt a similar rule to allow an auction similar to what they do for RGGI. Is really how we're going to change the dynamic on getting more renewable energy built, on providing the incentives for companies to change how they're doing business so that they're doing it in a way that is less polluting, and making sure that we're investing funds that are received from that through, substantially into disadvantaged communities, so they really get the benefits that they have not seen before, and to help repair the fact that we have had many years of pollution that have impacted these neighborhoods very negatively and impaired public health. So we'd like to see another $1 billion for Sustainable Future Fund so that we can continue those investments that were started this year, to make sure that we're showing New Yorkers that making these investments is good for them. It's good for their pocketbooks. It's good for investing in clean energy infrastructure, and it's good for making their homes more efficient. So that is definitely top of mind for us. We really want to make sure that we are getting affordable clean energy, right? We need to get our offshore wind projects back on track. It's really disappointing that the president claims that there's an energy emergency, but then he's pushing a stop work order when he's lost litigation already to stop all the offshore wind projects in our state, after already earlier this year, the governor and labor and environment and industry came together to push back to keep Empire Wind on track. And really, we need these projects to keep moving forward. So making sure that that's happening is really critical for us. But we also need to be laying the groundwork for when we're out of the federal logjam, since they don't seem like they're going to issue any new permits or new leases. But I think there's a lot the state can do to make sure that we're getting ready for the next round of offshore wind. Solar has been the bright spot in all of our work here on renewables. We've met the statutory goal early, a year early, actually, which is amazing since we're behind on so many other climate goals. We really need to double down on distributed solar. This is the rooftop solar and the community solar that can really make a difference. We saw this year that on the hottest day of the year, solar saved us about $90 million for ratepayers because of all that solar that was happening, and it made sure that we didn't have a blackout. So that's homeowners and businesses and community organizations helping to prevent blackouts and helping to lower that cost of clean energy. We can double down on that to help us with some of the challenges that the NYSO says that we're facing related to energy. And it's not the only solution. We still need lots of utility scale energy as well, but it is something that can help us and can be built a lot faster. So related to that, we'd like to see a bill to automate permitting where a project is within the local zoning. So that's really going to be something that reduces that red tape for getting projects built for homeowners, especially at a time when the federal government has stopped the funding that supported it. We're really excited about, investing more in battery storage. We know that this is something that can also help to reduce how much ultimate infrastructure we need by sort of balancing out the grid and deploying that energy when we need it the most. So we need to, again, cut the red tape for getting that energy sited. And we also should stop adding taxes to it. We don't add taxes. We don't have sales taxes on, fossil fuel diesel generators, right? But we do on battery storage. I think in general, we do need to take a bigger, more holistic look about how are we planning and paying for and procuring our energy, because the system is not working as well as we would like it to. And I think that's a challenge for generators, for utilities, and for customers alike. So I think we have an opportunity to do something on that front. On buildings, I think there's always more work to be done on that. Buildings are our number one source of climate pollution. We've passed laws to try and help phase things out. But I think there's more work we need to do to help make sure that we have a strategy for reducing our reliance on fossil fuels for buildings. On transportation, right, which is, depending on how you count it, it's definitely the second largest, if not the largest source of pollution. There's so much we can do. Washington has been walking backwards. They're making our cars less efficient, not more efficient. They've, taken away the federal tax credits. We need to make sure we're deploying the dollars that we have to get more EV infrastructure out there because people still have something called range anxiety. Although I myself have driven my car from New York City to Buffalo to Saratoga up to Montreal and back, and I never had range anxiety. But that is something that some people have, and I think we need to keep deploying that. But one way we can really make those investments and provide incentives for not just moving to renewable fuels, but also to electrification is adopting a clean fuel standard for transportation. California has done it. They are ahead of their schedule for their emissions reductions as a result of that. I think that's something that we can be doing here, and it doesn't cost the state any money other than a little bit of administrative overhead. We have a policy agenda coming out very shortly that will get into great detail, but I think those are some of the highlights of things. We want to see continued environmental funding, the $425 million for the Environmental Protection Fund, more money for water infrastructure, and making sure that we have some capital funding. So there's a lot.
Yes, there's certainly a lot. And yeah, short windows to do it the way the legislative session works. So it'll be a busy few months for us all, and then straight into election season. So I want to end with the same thing I'm going to start asking every single guest. But what are 3 things that you'd like people to take away or do after listening to this episode?
First takeaway is that state leadership and state action matter, and they really can make a difference. We need the governor and the state legislature to keep moving forward on clean energy and on streamlining processes to make it easier for building out clean energy without compromising on environmental protections. But again, those are nonpartisan issues. So state leadership matters and makes a difference. The second thing is that these things don't happen in a vacuum. People need to advocate. They need to tell their elected officials what they care about, what they support, what they oppose. But you have to come out and say things when you support them too, right? It's very easy. We see this. People often come out to say no to something, especially a local project, and they don't come out when they're for something. And so we've been working on trying to get more people out to say yes to projects. We need people to be advocating. And of course, the most important thing you can do as an individual is to vote, right? Leadership matters. We had the biggest investment in climate in the entire world, and the president has rolled back almost all of it. So voting does make a difference.
Absolutely. All right, Julie, I'll let you get back to it because, as we said, we got a lot to do. So, Julie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Barry.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Plugging In. I hope you learned something, and I hope you share this knowledge with someone else. It would be incredibly helpful if you leave us a 5-star review wherever you found this podcast. If there's a topic you would like us to cover in the future or have a question about clean energy, send us an email at podcast@aceny.org. You can follow us on social media using the links in the show notes, or consider joining our Clean Energy Supporters mailing list at aceny.org/support. Your support is crucial to creating a brighter and healthier New York. I'll see you next time.
Tomorrow we breathe easier. Tomorrow the skies are clear. Today we are plugging in.